Whether you're in North or South Carolina or anywhere else in the world, enter the Cat Cave with Michael Davis, Ryan Frick, and Shannon Smith to listen to your favorite Carolina Panthers podcasts, a part of the Keep Pounding Podcast Network and Fans First Sports Network, where you can find shows like Believe in Panthers, Embrace Debate, and Inside the Vault. Welcome, everybody, to another installment, 43 episodes in. My man right here, Michael Davis, who just finished up Out of Pocket, come back having a good week this week. Solid numbers on Out of Pocket. MD, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It is awesome for Out Pocket to come back. We were talking about this backstage. It was 199 days, which is a long time. It was a decent Intercontinental title reign. But yeah, it's been awesome. It's awesome to see the support for people from, watching Out Pocket with Michael Davis on the Tobacco Road Sports Radio YouTube channel. We're 4 days a week. Wednesday, I have time off to do the Cat Cave, to do the Drop the Mic Wrestling podcast, and also the support because this is Fans First Sports Network podcast of the articles I'm writing for FFSN now. So really appreciate the support. And Shannon hosting the show this week, dude, mad props to you.
We're going to see how this goes. And, of course, to my proverbial left, all in green. Even though this is an NFL, this is for the Panthers, the UFL is coming up, and that means tap outs and touchdowns is going to be coming back. So your guy, Bully Rye, is here. If I can get my points right, we're here. So there we are, man. Hard to do. But Ryan, man, how you doing?
Ryan's
Oh,
muted, so
you
we're off
muted,
to
man.
a great start. I love it already.
Perfect start. Listen, it's St. Patty's Day weekend. Maybe I've got it started a little early. I don't know. But yeah, it's that's hence the all green. Like you said, tap outs and touchdowns coming back soon. A lot of free agency news to get to in the NFL before the UFL starts. And that's kind of why we're here to start some of that free agency talk today, because some decent moves and some not so good moves with the Panthers happening so far in NFL free agency 2024.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, with that being said, you know how it is, man. Do you want the good news or the bad news? So, we're going to go ahead and begin with the bad news here, as Brian Burns and Frankie Luvu are out of Carolina right now. Brian Burns going to the New York Giants. Frankie Luvu slid underneath us out of nowhere and just went to the Commanders. So, I'm gonna go ahead and start with MD. I'm gonna go ahead and start with you, Mike. So, are you shocked that both of these guys left?
Well, we were talking on the show a few weeks ago about what's the positives out of the 2023 Carolina Panthers team. And we were like, it was the defense. I mean, it was Brian Burns and Frankie Luvu being standouts on that defense, even with a hindered secondary. They also released Dante Jackson here in the past week or so. So it's looking tough with Carolina. Obviously, we'll get into their additions too, but it's upsetting, But at the end of the day, I don't think you could have paid Brian Burns that money. Des Johnson, the producer of Tobacco Road Sports Radio, brought it up on Out of Pocket, I believe on Tuesday, so yesterday, that dude, like once you pay Brian Burns all that money, and by the time you rebuild the Panthers offense and the team around him, like you basically waste his career. So they may have just done right by Brian Burns and get him to a team where he can get all that money, get that starting position. But it stinks, Brian Burns and Frankie Luvu's time in Carolina, they probably didn't get as much as they actually could have from the deal.
Absolutely. I was thinking about that as well too, because both of these guys are integral parts of the defense, and for them to slip away so easily, it seems, it's not great at all for Carolina. Not great for the defense. Evero has been coaching his tail off with that team, and for him to lose two good parts is going to be a hindrance. So, Bully, let's talk about this Brian Burns trade. Did Carolina get enough from this man? Did they get enough at all?
Well, before we get to Brian Burns, I do want to talk a little about Frankie Luvu, because they let Frankie Luvu go for nothing.
Yep.
He signed a free agent deal with the Commanders, $36 million, 3-year deal. He led the team in tackles last season. We talked about that on the show, and about as far as postseason defensive rankings and stuff like that goes. I as much as I hate to see Brian Burns go, I didn't want to see Frankie Luvu leave. Now they've made up with losing Frankie Luvu by signing something that was announced today. They signed Ashawn Robinson on a 3-year deal out of San Francisco. They also signed, and I'm forgetting his name,
Josie Jewell,
linebacker for the Denver Broncos. So they tried to add some pieces to get some of that pass rush and to get some of that tackling ability from losing Frankie Luvu. But when you talk about Brian Burns, I was clear on this show last week when I said that there's no way that Brian Burns comes back for another year in Carolina. If it was going to be a tag and trade situation, whatever the case was, that was what was going to happen. That next year Brian Burns was not going to be in Carolina. Michael Davis was not too happy with me by offering that up. But it happened. Here's the thing, and if you're watching on the Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel along with us, there's a graphic that just came on the screen according to CBS Sports, CBS Football. In 2022, when the Panthers were first starting to make some moves and they got rid of Christian McCaffrey, they had an opportunity to trade Brian Burns away for a king's ransom. The same way that the Detroit Lions did when they got Jared Goff in the trade to Matthew Stafford. Now, that turned into a Super Bowl for the Rams, but the Rams are notorious for giving up first-round picks because they want to win now. And back in 2022, the LA Rams offered the Carolina Panthers a first-round pick this year, a first-round pick next year, and a second-round pick that would have been last year. Instead, the Carolina Panthers got the 39th overall pick in this year's draft and a 5th-round pick in next year's draft. Now, listen, I'm satisfied with the 39th overall pick because I've been talking all offseason that if the Panthers were going to make a move, they needed to get more draft capital in this draft. I didn't expect them to be able to get into the first round, but I thought they needed to get back in the draft and get somewhat of a high pick. So I'm glad they were able to get the second-round pick back for Brian Burns. And I mean, listen, Brian Burns signed a contract with the Giants, 5 years, $150 million. I mean, he got the $30 million a year that he wanted for the next 5 years, and his guaranteed money, I think it was 85 or 84.5 or $85 million guaranteed, makes him the second highest paid defensive end in NFL history. So Brian Burns got what he wanted. He got out of Carolina. He got paid, and he did. He's going to go on a team that's now going to compete. The NFC East is getting that much more powerful with all the moves that they've made outside of one. But now Brian Burns gets to go on a defense that can be a real power to talk about coming in, for the next few years in New York. And it's it goes to the point. It goes to my point that I've been spouting all off season. David Tepper is the worst owner in sports. David Tepper needs to # sell the team, because without David Tepper selling the team, without David Tepper stepping aside, we're going to continue to make mistakes such as this. You had, again, all the draft capital at the tip of your fingers, and you let it slip away because you thought you were going to be able to sign Frankie Luvu, or I'm sorry, you thought you were able to sign Brian Burns to a long-term contract, and then you decided, I don't want to come out of pocket, so to speak. So it's unfortunate, but I knew it was coming. If you didn't see it coming, then I have a bridge that I'd like to sell you. But it is what it is, man. Brian Burns out in Carolina, and two of their top defensive players. I know they got a lot of people coming back, and they signed a couple of guys this week, but two key pieces to this defense that made this defense what it was last year, no longer here. Really unfortunate situation.
So before we move on, I do got to play devil's advocate here real quick. I think the Panthers should have gotten more for Brian Burns. But still, moving up to 39th overall, they'll have, I believe, the 33rd and the 39th overall pick. So that'll help, and maybe they can use that to kind of get in the first round if a prospect starts to drop and there's some capital there. Again, at the end of the day, it's hard to part with a guy Brian Burns' caliber and not get a first-round pick, but this team's in a different spot than they were a year and a half ago when they declined that deal. But leaving 2 firsts on the table, that's a lot.
Shannon, I want to throw something at you before we move on. because
Okay.
I did a lot of talking about Frankie Luvu. What do you
Mhm.
think the loss to Frankie Luvu does to this team? Because I made the case that Frankie Luvu leaving was a bigger loss than Brian Burns, considering his production. What does the loss of Frankie Luvu mean for this defense in your opinion?
The loss of Frankie Luvu, that your future is at stake. This is a young team. It's a young defense. Brian Burns, you can tell, is clearly not happy, but Frankie Luvu had a lot of room to grow with this defense, especially with Evero coming back. He has a very, very good defensive tackle in Derek Brown. So this defense still has pieces, and this defense still has room to grow. But with Frankie Luvu leaving, I think that hurts even worse. Brian Burns is one thing, but Luvu is another. That's both sides of your defense not having quality players. And it's really gonna hurt, especially in the passing game, because we all know when we remember the Panthers were dead last in sacks. They could not get to the quarterback. They could not pressure the quarterback. It was hard for them to pressure quarterbacks, and it showed later on in the year, especially at the tail end of the year when there were no points being scored at all. Teams beat us virtually by field goals, which is worse. It's good that you're stopping them from scoring, but when your offense can't score on the other side of the ball, it puts your defense on an island. And so someone like Frankie Luvu, who got a lot of snaps, who got a lot of plays, it's hard to have him go. He got more snaps than Burns did, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, I think he was on the field more than Burns was. And dude was around the ball all day long. So you're missing a guy. Burns is one thing, but Luvu is the other. That to me, and I think I got to go with Ryan on that one. The Luvu loss, I think, is worse. Brian Burns got what he wanted. He got out of Carolina, got a good contract, a very good contract. He's going to be contending in a very tough division. Now he's going from a cupcake division to a very tough division in the NFC East, and it's going to be really, really tough to win. But he can sniff a championship in the NFC East and he can in the NFC South. So
I do want to throw out there too. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I do want to throw out there too that reports came out earlier today that former Vikings defensive, I guess he was I don't know if he was defensive lineman or linebacker, pass rusher DJ Wanham was visiting with the Panthers and then flying to Chicago to also meet with them. DJ Wanham had 8 sacks last year. So you talk about someone who can get to the passer. DJ Wanham had a couple of slow years, again, out of South Carolina, not trying to dwell on that here. Had a couple of slow years dealing with some injuries up in Minnesota, but he was kind of a hidden talent out of college and showed some of his potential last year. So he'd be a nice addition for this defense as well if he does wind up signing here in Carolina.
absolutely. So of course we're going from the defense now. Well, before we go, does that mean the defense is going to be a weak link now, or is it still going to be what it was? Well,
I
I'll go,
feel like,
go DMD.
yeah, I feel like we still got to see what happens. I feel like people are underrating Josie Jewell coming to this team. He's had 100 plus tackles in 3 of the last 4 years, and he did that in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
So kudos to him. Maybe Josie Jewell is the hidden jewel for the Carolina Panthers on defense. And people in, 4 or 5 games into the season are like, Luvu who? I mean, that could be a possibility. So I really like their additions of Ashawn Robinson, of Josie Jewell, and we're going to see more probably as soon as we're done recording this Cat Cave podcast for FFSN and Tobacco Road. But hey, they're starting to build, and they're building from the ground up. And yeah, the defense took a hit with Burns and Luvu leaving, but it's not the end of the world. We still have a full off season to see what they can do.
It could be worse. We could have given our old quarterback that signed with Minnesota $10 million, and why can't I say his name?
I know
That's how forgettable he is.
I know that man, Sam Darnold, right there.
Sam Darnold.
So,
Wow.
Sam Darnold.
1 year,
No
$10 million
way.
contract with the Minnesota Vikings. So
Shoo.
it could have been worse.
That is true, though. So now that we went from the defense, we're now going to the offense. And we all pretty much have said this throughout the season. The scourge of the Carolina Panthers has been the offensive line. But now 2 signings have came up. The Panthers spent some money on guards Robert Hunt and Damien Lewis. So, Ryan, I'm going to go to you on this one. Do you like Carolina spending money on the offensive line?
I mean, listen, if they didn't spend the money on the offensive line, everybody in the media, fans everywhere are going to ask the question, David Tepper, Dan Morgan, what are you doing? So I know that both of these guys have a lot of experience. Robert Hunt is an incredible guard, or was an incredible guard for the Miami Dolphins, a team that needed to keep Tua Tagovailoa upright, and for the most part did. I mean, $20 million a year. His first 2 years worth $44 million, and are fully guaranteed. So they expect to have him for a little while at the very least. Yeah, listen, I don't hate the signings, right? Like, we could have thrown $150 million at Brian Burns, or we could have done something to improve the offense, which is what everybody in the offseason has said that they needed to do. You and Michael on this show have talked about the fact that games are won and lost on the offense and defensive lines. And so if you don't go and bolster this offensive line, you're not going to be able to do that. And with as many times as Bryce Young got sacked last year, as many times that he was running for his life within I want to say he was bottom 5 in time allowed from snap to pressure.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's a lot of money that we spent. But if it works out, then we're finally going to look like we know what we're doing. But there's still more that needs to be done. You can't just sign 2 guards and say, okay, it's fixed. Now let's go and figure out what else we need. Like, there's still more work to do. And I'm sure Michael can attest to that as well.
Absolutely. There's plenty more pieces to be filled on this offense that definitely needs it. Dead last in points per game, dead last in total yards. It's really tough. The passing yards were not great, although Bryce Young threw more touchdowns and interceptions by +1. It's very tough to do. It's hard to complete passes when your quarterback's on your back. John Madden said that best. So, MD, the next one I would have is, would you rather have an offensive line or a good defense? Which would you rather have?
Ooh, that is a tough one, because defenses can win championships, but dude, offensive lines, like, especially where the Panthers are right now, they went up and drafted Bryce Young to be their future. And the Panthers, like, gave up so many sacks. It was horrendous. Like, we had to talk week in, week out during the season, like, we have to protect Bryce Young if he's going to last in the NFL. Like, people were comparing Bryce and CJ Stroud like it was a fair competition, and it wasn't. Because if you put any quarterback behind the offensive line the Panthers had last year, it was going to end the same way. And
Mhm.
so what do the Panthers do? They go out and they sign Robert Hunt. They go out and sign Damian Lewis and say, hey, we are committed to protecting our future in Bryce Young. This might also help the run game. And we know Miles Sanders couldn't get going. So, dude, this offensive line, I am so happy that the Panthers actually are willing to invest in offensive line, to where if they continue on this track and this offensive line ends up gelling well, this could be in a couple years considered one of the best offensive lines, because of where they started at the very bottom and they've worked their way up to protect their future.
Absolutely, because I mean, the thing about it is that we've been harping on it all year. From the regular season, we've been harping on the fact that this offensive line has had Bryce running for his life. Ryan had the hot take where he talked about, should Bryce Young sit out for the rest of the year, and that was mixed. That was mixed emotions. It really was. It was something to ponder, and it was something to think about. But I think if you're trying to have a future, if you're trying to have something with this Carolina organization, you got to let your young man play, even though it could be detrimental to his health. But with that being said, we're going to go further on into the show. And Ryan's got a little something for us here.
Hey, guys, I know we're all excited that NFL free agency is finally here, but the wait is also over, as DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of NASCAR, is now live in North Carolina. Now you can legally bet on all your favorite sports anytime, anywhere, right here in North Carolina with DraftKings. For a limited time, new customers who sign up with promo code Tobacco Road and bet $5 will receive $250 instantly in bonus bets. DraftKings has the best features, including same-game parlays, player props, and more with fast and easy payouts right at your fingertips. This weekend coming up, we've got the Food City 500 on Sunday with Kyle Larson sitting at plus 400, Brad Keselowski sitting at plus 1,300, and Bubba Wallace sitting at plus 4,500. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now using code Tobacco Road and bet $5 to get $250 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code Tobacco Road. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 877-718-5543 or visit morethanagame.nc.gov. 21 plus, North Carolina only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. Deposit and eligibility restrictions apply. Terms at DraftKings.com/sportsbook/NC. NASCAR is not a sponsor of this promotion and used under license.
Ryan, appreciate that click for DraftKings. Hey, everybody, go ahead and watch it. NASCAR is afoot. We're getting ready to begin the NASCAR season, but we're getting back to football, back to the Panthers. Now, with this being said, with the offense and the defense being taken under consideration, let's go ahead and move from the defensive line, the defensive and the offensive line to other parts of the Panthers team. So tossing this up to Mike. Well, no, I'll go ahead and go first on this one. Now, the position,
Okay.
what would you like Carolina to upgrade in free agency? I'll go ahead and go first on this one. Carolina needs to invest in a downhill threat wide receiver, is what I think. This is a very deep draft. We have a deep draft full of receivers. We have a draft full of offensive linemen. The quarterbacks are already going to be gone. The quarterbacks in the draft are more than likely going to be gone. The big name guys are going to be gone before the first round is done. If we play the cards right, then most of those quarterbacks are going to be gone. There are plenty of receivers out there. I think Carolina's got to look for something probably in that second or that third round. The combine has looked really, really good. I think that Carolina's got to invest in a downhill threat. Bryce Young has got to do it in free agency. I mean, sorry about that. Not in the draft, but free agency as well too. I think the downhill threats out there. Calvin Ridley is still around. There are receivers out there that can be done. So in free agency, I think that we got to go with that. But so Ryan, what do you think, man? What else?
I love jumping the line and getting it before Michael too. Listen, Darnell Mooney just signed with the Falcons, right? You've got, I believe, Devontae Parker signed a 1-year deal with the Eagles today. There are some wide receivers out there. Listen, this was the worst year. Last year was the worst year to invest in a running back because so many running backs came into this free agency offseason. You've got Derrick Henry going to Baltimore. You've got Joe Mixon getting traded to Houston. You've got Austin Eckler going to Washington. So many running backs that if Carolina had just held out for one more year, could have had a stud running back in this free agency, period. But instead, they get to deal with Miles Sanders, who, again, probably a great guy, doesn't fit the system. I'm with you, Shannon. I think we need to go out and get a wide receiver. T. Higgins wants out in Cincinnati. I don't know what's going on in Cincinnati right now, but they traded away Joe Mixon. Tyler Boyd has not re-signed. T. Higgins wants out. I don't think you can give up a bunch of draft capital and going to get T. Higgins. But if there's a way that you can find a way to get T. Higgins, by all means, go do it. Otherwise, wait. There's plenty of wide receivers in the draft. I know they're talking about like a record number of wide receivers going in the first round this year. I think there are going to be talented receivers. I mean, you look at guys like Puka Nacua and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who are late round draft picks at wide receiver that are like complete superstars for the Rams and Lions respectively. So there's going to be wide receivers you can go out there and get in the draft if you cannot find a way to get a guy like T. Higgins, because the wide receivers are starting to thin out as far as what you're looking for. Like, you're not going to get a stud outside of T. Higgins in this cycle. So, I mean, listen, they need help. They need help with defensive backs. I know you've got some quote-unquote stars or quote-unquote potential stars out there. I honestly truly still believe you can get something for J.C. Horn and trade him away for a draft pick, potentially a wide receiver, to sort of, again, work your way back in this draft. Listen, the fact that Burns and Luvu were gone, we are rebuilding. So if you're going to rebuild, the defense is not going to be as good as it was last year. You can talk about Ashawn and you just said his name earlier. I still can't say it again. Jewel. You can talk about the potential they're going to bring this defense, but it's not going to be Burns and Luvu. And so there's stuff out there, but I'm glad outside of the two guards that we signed that Carolina didn't go out and blow a bunch of money on free agents, because typically speaking, the teams that spend the most in free agency, it doesn't typically tend to work out for them. We saw Houston a couple years ago spent more money than anybody in the NFL offseason, and they wound up with the number 1 overall pick in the following year's draft. Michael, what say you? Is there anything that you prefer to see us add in free agency, or do you think that we need to focus on drafting at this point?
So when you look at the draft, of course, there's, people you can, hope to get with 2 high second-round picks, either at wide receiver or the offensive line, or even start to rebuild your defense with some guys. I mentioned Chop Robinson, by the way, a couple weeks ago. Now you're seeing him in mock drafts at the end of the first round, just like I told you after his big combine. But I digress. When looking at these free agents, yeah, T. Higgins wants out of Cincinnati. I don't think you can trade for him necessarily. Calvin Ridley's still on the market, which is surprising to me. But
he's narrowed it down, by the way. I wanted to mention this too. He narrowed it down between New England and Jacksonville. So I don't think it's likely that Calvin Ridley finds his way to Carolina either. Just want to throw that out there.
I mean, who knows? There are teams that can hop in right at the last second. With Jeremy Chin going to Washington, could they go and get Cameron Curl, who was on the Commanders last year? Or could they get Kendall Fuller? Panthers need secondary help. But I'm looking at some of the top free agent offensive linemen. I don't know if Tyron Smith comes. I don't know if Jonah Williams comes, especially if you're committed to Akeem Ekwonu being your starting left tackle. But Trent Brown, wouldn't be a bad veteran option. He only played 8 games last year. He's 30 years old. But, something to where, okay, you can put Trent Brown there and then, draft somebody in the second round and have Trent kind of coach up Ekwonu and coach whoever else you draft here in the spring. You use that. But it is very clear and evident the Panthers need to work on their offensive line, need to work on that starting 5, and that could be the recipe for success when it comes to the Carolina Panthers.
I would say so. I like everything that you guys are saying. It makes a lot of sense. But we'll go on this last one here. Ryan, we'll go ahead and get it with you here. What do you wish they would wait to upgrade into the draft? What are you looking for the Panthers better off building on in the draft?
I would have loved to have seen Xavier Worthy fall into the second round and the Panthers to grab him with the first pick. Dude broke the 40-time record at the NFL Combine. Listen, I just made a case that they need to go trade for T. Higgins. There's going to be plenty of wide receivers in this draft. They need wide receivers. Laviska Shenault. I can't even say his DJ Chark. I mentioned those guys' names last year as potential new number 1s. Didn't tend to work out that way. Jonathan Mingo still sitting there, didn't look all that great, but then again, nobody did for that offense last year. I think there's plenty of pieces to go get in the draft. If the Panthers can continue to find ways to get more picks and get more into this draft, there's plenty of guys that can make a difference.
Yeah, for me, it's offensive line, it's a wide receiver, but Des mentioned this on Out Pocket, and I've thought about it over the last 24 hours. I'm like, hey, you could stockpile picks in the second, third, fourth, fifth round and just start getting guys who are hungry, who have that dog in them, who may not be the highest touted prospects, but you know what? They're hungry, they're gems. And if you have confidence in your scouting department to go find those guys, you can help rebuild an entire new identity of this Carolina Panthers team, or go in throwback version and get the identity of the Panthers that helped them get to Super Bowl 50 against the Denver Broncos, helped them get to a Super Bowl against the Patriots a couple decades ago. Get those kind of guys that you really want to focus on locker room wise.
Definitely need that identity for the team. Now, with that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and conclude show number 43. And if you will, do me a favor and go see my man Michael Davis on Out of Pocket Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, right, Mike?
That is right.
All right, great. So his IG is at out of pocket _TRSR and Drop the Mic Wrestling. He will be dropping another episode, and his episodes are really, really good. If you're into wrestling, go ahead and see my man MD. And for Bully Rye here, or for myself, actually, for myself, we'll go with X Twitter at podcast _Smitty, and then with Ryan Frick. Once again, going for tap outs and touchdowns real soon. I'm waiting for the UFL to begin. I'm waiting for your analysis with Banker Bill. You can find him at X/Twitter at tap outs and TDs and Facebook.com/tap outs and touchdowns. And with that being said, guys, you may now exit the cat cave until next week, where we'll be talking about more free agency, but listen to more content by Michael and Ryan and the Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel, and more Carolina-centric podcasts on the Keep Pounding Podcast Network, powered by the Fans First Sports Network. For Ryan Frick, from Michael Davis and Shannon Smith here, we'll see you next week.